Okay, well, shalom and hello, everyone. Nice to be back. I didn't realize it's been 2 months. That was a really long time. My apologies for that long break. It was, well, unintended. You may have heard it was just some family issues. My father's wife got really sick, and she's my dad's main caretaker. My dad is in a wheelchair, he can't speak. And so I had to take over from her and look after him. And it was just, it was a 24-hour job. I couldn't really leave, and his internet was not strong enough to be able to have class. So that was it. And so it was really difficult. And she felt better. It got better. She got out of hospital, and then again, she had to go back to hospital. So yeah, there was just no way I could continue with class. But we'll continue now from now on. She's a little better now, and I'm back with my mom now. So the internet is quite good here. And I hope we'll be able to finish the text very soon. Today, of course, we'll start with the motivation, setting the motivation, saying some prayers as usual. And then to talk a little bit about what to do this coming week. And then regarding the text, well, we got to verse 34, I've been told. I don't remember what verse we got to, but looking at the text again, it makes sense that this is how far we got. I'll briefly summarize what we went through in chapter 11 so far, just to give you a feel for what chapter 11 is all about, or just to remind you, and then we'll continue with the verses. But let's start as usual with some breathing meditation first, followed by visualization in order to feel inspired and generate compassion, of course, as the motivating force for this session. And then, of course, the prayers. Okay. And visualize in the space in front of you an emanation of the Buddha, appearing as a fully ordained monk. With all its qualities of body, speech, and mind. Manifestation of perfect wisdom and compassion. Inspiring and guiding us to the state of awakening. While at the same time being inseparable from your Lama, or your Lamas. And then think that the Buddha is surrounded by great masters who've attained high realizations and dependence on his teachings. In particular, the great masters of the Nalanda tradition, like Nagarjuna, Uttapalita, of course, Chandrakirti. Buddha is also surrounded by all the lineage lamas of India and of Tibet. And all the other great realized beings. And the different Buddhist traditions. And they too guide us through their example, their teachings, and their inspiration. All being of the same nature as your Lama. And then think that you're also surrounded by all sentient beings, sitting all around you, wherever there's some space. With their different worries, insecurities, their pain, grief, anxiety. And so many different types of afflictions. All arising from their basic misapprehension of reality. Just like us, simply wanting to be happy. Constantly creating the causes for more suffering. And so from the depth of your heart, generate affectionate love, that feeling of deep care and closeness. That doesn't really consider itself separate from all these beings. Since we're all interconnected, And our minds are so similar. And that deep care then towards all sentient beings gives rise to great compassion. Type of affection that not only wishes for all sentient beings to be free from suffering and its causes, but also wishes personally to be able to protect all beings from suffering and its causes. That feels, may I be able to help sentient beings to reach a state free from all problems and difficulties. From all unwanted experiences. And then that mind of great compassion, it grows stronger. Our aspiration turns into a determination to do whatever is necessary and for however long it takes to lead all sentient beings towards a state of liberation. And since we can only effectively do so once we have freed our mind from all obstructions, especially obstructions to omniscience, let's generate the mind of enlightenment, the aspiration to become fully enlightened. In order to be able to fulfill our aspiration to be of greatest benefit to all sentient beings. And then with that mind, holding on to that mind, let's recite the prayers. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. by the accumulation of merits, of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits, of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from happiness that is free from suffering. And may all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. And with our heart full of joyful faith in the Buddha and all the great masters surrounding him, reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginning this time. And rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence. And turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of others to the great enlightenment. Okay then. So for this coming week, well, you had 2 weeks, 2 months, to hopefully fill your weeks with bodhicitta and the wisdom of emptiness, wisdom understanding emptiness. And well, I guess for the last, how many more classes do we have? 2, 3, not sure how long it takes. But anyway, let's focus for those classes, excuse me, completely on the mind of enlightenment, of course, and on what we've learned with regard to emptiness. So as to the mind of enlightenment, well, we've received many teachings by His Holiness. It is best, of course, to follow the advice His Holiness has given again and again about the importance of warm-heartedness, of dedicating our life towards the benefit of all sentient beings, and in that way, of course, towards our own benefit, based on the understanding that we're all interconnected, that we're not really separate from sentient beings, that whoever we meet, whoever we encounter, are just like us. On the basic level, in terms of the nature of our mind, our needs, our wishes, there's very little difference. Basic nature of our mind, being pure, being unaffected by our afflictions, well, in that way, exactly the same. exactly the same as the nature of a Buddha, as the nature of a mind of a Buddha. And so in our encounter with other people throughout this week, especially the people all around us, it's not so much about all sentient beings far away, but rather about the beings we meet on a daily basis. It's very easy to pray for all sentient beings and have some abstract sense of sentient beings somewhere, but ignore the beings around us. So it's important, of course, in our interaction with those people, mainly people, human beings that we meet on a daily basis, our family, our neighbors, and so forth, to make an extra effort to be of benefit to them. And even just with little things. It doesn't have to be something dramatic, changing the world type of thing. I mean, that is difficult to do even for a Buddha. The little things, to focus on that in particular. But at the same time, not forget, how does this person exist? How do I exist? How does possible insult that I've experienced, if I've been insulted, if I've been hurt, well, again, think again, it seems so solid. This insult, this problem, the other person appears so solidly, so, well, existent in and of him or herself. But think again, after everything we've learned, well, the other being existing of many different parts, which of course our mind perceives, apprehends in a certain way, and based on whatever we apprehend, based on that, we label this, that, and the other. Without whatever we label to be actually found from the side of the person, and therefore existing merely conventionally. So to remind ourselves of that, allow ourselves to be more compassionate, more loving, make an extra effort, even if we're already more loving and more compassionate than, I don't know, a year or two ago, but there's definitely room for improvement, and to try and fill that room of improvement, so to say. Okay, and of course, not forget, again and again, as His Holiness says, this combination of compassion, love, bodhicitta on one hand, and of course, the understanding of the ultimate nature of all phenomena. All right, so that's what I'd like you to focus on this coming week. Get back to this old routine of trying to integrate this, bring this into your practice. And really, most important, of course, is to remember what His Holiness keeps saying. And then we'll continue so with the 11th chapter, which what's so beautiful about this, of course, it presents the Buddha. It presents the Buddha's qualities. And if we aspire, if we're aspiring towards Buddhahood, that is, we're practicing the mind of enlightenment, however little that is, I mean, without expecting that we're going to be bodhisattvas, I don't know, anytime soon. So no matter how long it's going to take, it doesn't matter, to be determined, I want to practice this. I want to practice the mind of enlightenment, no matter how hard it is to actually generate this type of consciousness, this type of mind. But for that, we also need to know, what does it mean to be a Buddha? To just wish for this, again, abstract, just we want to be enlightened for some abstract sentient beings. We want to be, wanting to be enlightened. What does that enlightenment mean? We have this abstract sense of something we don't really understand. And here the 11th chapter gives us a chance to understand, to get a sense of what we're aspiring towards, how meaningful this is, how important this is. And of course, based on the understanding, we can all do this, however impossible it may seem right now. Okay, so just to summarize briefly what we've gone through. In the 11th chapter, the chapter starts off with a summary of the qualities that precede Buddhahood, the 10 grounds, which are the different levels that you reach once you've realized emptiness directly. And so these qualities are described basically by way of saying, well, it's just a multiplication of what you've perceived, of what you've achieved before. And it's all about bodhicitta, an understanding of emptiness. You can summarize it in that way. And then once you've gone through these, you've attained one after the other, these different grounds, these 10 levels, then you reach the resultant ground, actual Buddhahood. And the way it is explained in Chandrakirti's text, well, this resultant ground, first, there's a brief explanation of how you get there just before, just when you reach that last level before Buddhahood. What is it? What happens in that last moment? And that is followed then by explaining the Buddha's body, the Buddha's qualities. Bodies is a little misleading, that term. It's much more the Buddha's qualities, of the Buddha's aspects. And of course, the great qualities the Buddha has in the sense of the mental qualities in particular. So the Buddha's bodies and the Buddha's mental qualities, Buddha's abilities. Anyway, so it's verse 10 and 11 that teach us, so the first 9 verses are a summary of the qualities of the 10 grounds, which we've gone through. And then verse 10 and 11 in the 11th chapter teaches the 10 grounds. So where a bodhisattva for the last time enters into a meditative equipoise, apprehending emptiness, that serves as an antidote to some obscuration or subtle obscuration that is actually not in the nature of the mind of that bodhisattva. And at the same time, while in a particular pure realm, akanishta, and this is from the sutric point of view, which is different to Tantra, where you have all types of pure lands or pure realms. Here it is one pure realm described called akanishta. And in that state, then the bodhisattva attains the state of a Buddha. And after that has been described in verse 10 and 11, then verse 12 to 16, there's a short debate with an opponent saying, well, how can you really realize emptiness? This whole thing about realizing emptiness and removing what is to be removed, it's just a negation of something. How can you have an affirmative object such as a mind realizing that? And there's a response to that in verses 13 to 16, where Chandrakirti answers or rebuts that particular debate or that particular objection, which is actually now 13 and 14, verse 13 and 14, this objection is refuted. And then verse 15 and 16, Chandrakirti just gives some explanation how, although the Buddha has got the mind that's totally pure of any kind of obscuration, and there's no longer any like a motivation, like a conceptual mind that wishes to do this, that, and the other, still the Buddha is able to effortlessly work towards the benefit of all sentient beings. The reason being the prayers the Buddha has recited as a Buddha, as a bodhisattva. The Buddha, before he became a Buddha, as a bodhisattva, has done these incredible aspirational prayers that are so powerful and whose effect is still lasting, will last, is everlasting. So it's through these aspirational prayers, it's through the merit of sentient beings, but of course also the mind and qualities of the Buddha himself. And so all this is responsible, or is causes the Buddha to be working for the benefit of sentient beings endlessly. But now to understand the Buddha's body and then the qualities of the Buddha, well, when it comes to the Buddha's body, verse 17 describes the Dharmakaya, which basically is the mental aspect of a Buddha, what we don't perceive. Mental aspect in terms of the emptiness of the mental consciousness of the Buddha, as well as the Buddha's state of being free from any kind of hindrances, different to our own mind, which from its own nature doesn't differ from a Buddha's mind, but of course is obscured, is obscured, is obstructed by afflictions, their imprints, and so forth. And so a Buddha's mind being totally free from such, so having attained the cessation of anything that is to be eliminated. So that refers to the Dharmakaya, that mental aspect, really. But that's not what benefits us. The Buddha's Dharmakaya, well, it doesn't directly benefit us because we can't communicate with it. And therefore you have also what's called the enjoyment body, a particular, an emanation of the Buddha and an aspect of the Buddha, which includes, of course, the mind and body both. But here the physical aspect, it's the Buddha as a person, that with the physical aspect, of course, that is important, because then sentient beings who cannot perceive the mind of a Buddha, of course, can therefore communicate with that Buddha, with that aspect of the Buddha emanation, if you like, or manifestation. But that emanation or enjoyment body, that enjoyment body, or Sambhogakaya, as it's called in Sanskrit, well, it's only available to bodhisattvas who've realized emptiness directly, like Arya bodhisattvas, not just realized emptiness directly, but have reached the Mahayana path of seeing. So it teaches only the Mahayana teachings, it only gives teachings of the universal vehicle, and it's got five qualities altogether that we discussed. So we are therefore, as ordinary beings, interested in what's called the causally concordant body. Now in verse 17, as I said, the Dharmakaya was described. In verse 18, the enjoyment body, or Sambhogakaya. And then in the next verses actually, the emanation body is described. It's here just described, like the outline is, or the heading for that particular section of the text is causally concordant body, but really what it's talking about is the emanation body. So in other words, you've got the mind of the Buddha, you've got that aspect of the Buddha that only Arya bodhisattvas can perceive. And then, of course, we need the aspect of the Buddha that can communicate, or that other beings can perceive or can communicate with, which is the emanation body. It's this ability of a Buddha, because of the power of the Buddha's mind, to emanate in different forms. So the enjoyment body, this extremely, I don't want to say pure, because the Buddha, there's nothing that is not pure, but this extremely inspirational aspect of the Buddha, but that, of course, you can only perceive if you have already removed certain obscurations by realizing emptiness directly and having the strength of bodhicitta that an Arya bodhisattva has. Therefore, what other sentient beings other than Arya bodhisattva needs are these other emanations. And so how are those described? Here, Chandakirti describes them in a particular way. He says that these emanations, they display, first in verses 19 to 22, it describes that these Buddha emanations, they display all the Buddha's activities of the past within a single pore of his body. Okay, so what does it tell us here? Not only does it display all his activities or his past activities, but it does so within the single pore of his body. Okay, so all his activities. Why would it display all his activities? Well, from his previous life, basically his training, what he's gone through, because that's what's most interesting to us. So to us, of course, there's more that a Buddha displays, but the main purpose of being a Buddha, the main purpose for us once we become enlightened, is to guide other sentient beings to that state. And that is here emphasized, saying that a Buddha manifests, of course, the past is gone, but still manifests these activities like an actor in a play, if you like, but of course a lot more convincing. So manifesting in different ways how the Buddha has practiced. So if you try and imagine that, how would that happen? Well, possibly in the form of great lamas. Okay, so we of course never know whether our lamas are fully enlightened or not. We don't know whether someone who's not a lama is fully enlightened or not, because a Buddha can manifest in many different ways. But taking, for instance, well, let's assume His Holiness the Dalai Lama is a Buddha. We don't know 100%. It's likely, but we don't know 100%. Anyway, so on the basis of His Holiness being enlightened, well, His Holiness's life, if His Holiness is an emanation of a Buddha, then he emanates his own practice as a bodhisattva. He emanates as a simple monk, as he keeps stressing, of course, but also talking about what he's done, and it's visible, like what His Holiness practices. It's well, definitely bodhicitta and so forth. So manifesting as a bodhisattva, again, if His Holiness is a Buddha, then that's just a manifestation of possibly whoever the Buddha he is, like the actual Buddha that emanates His Holiness, well, from a previous life, as an example. It could be from a previous life, or it could be verses 23 and 25 talk about the lives of other great beings. And it does so in the single pore, which means that's just one manifestation. I mean, there's so many pores in the body. So it manifests this to those beings, something else to other beings. There's no limit to the different manifestations. So if we think of just this world, of course, that's not enough to think there's only this planet Earth where human beings live, and that's it. And you'd be wondering, like, limitless Buddhas, where are they all? Like, they're all manifesting. I mean, that seems a little difficult to believe, but of course, we need to free ourselves from the sense there's just this little tiny planet Earth, and there's nothing more, and there are 8 billion people on this, or 7 billion people on this planet, and that's it. No, there's like other world systems, other galaxies. There's this huge universe, and possibly endless universes like that. And so getting a sense of the size and the possibility that our Earth is just one of endless other world systems, other worlds in which bodhisattvas, their emanations, emanate for sentient beings in order to help them, to show them how they can practice just like the Buddha has done as a bodhisattva and as a bodhisattva, or even before that, and attain the same state. So this is the most important, displaying all these inspirational activities. So if we think along these lines, there were so many great inspirational beings who've moved other beings to become, first of all, more moral, more kinder, not even talking about enlightenment necessarily. I mean, different people start at different levels. And so it's possible that of all the different religions, I mean, all the great beings, they're all manifestations of, well, what we call Buddhas, but just these awakened beings, teaching, showing us how to make the most out of our potential. So, and this is done with one pore and all the other pores as well. So there's just no limit what they can manifest, their own past activities, those of others, and so forth. So that's what verses 19 to 25 tell us. And in verse 26 and 27, what we learn is also 26 and 27. We learn also that it seems difficult to believe that the Buddha has no longer any intention, has no longer any conceptual mind. So how is this possible still to manifest that? And in verses 26 and 27, Chandrakirti tells us, well, there's no limitation. It's spontaneous. And there's also no limitation by certain laws of nature that we are not able to go beyond. But of course, the Buddha cannot go beyond all laws of nature, such as the law of karma. But certain laws of nature in terms of space and time, so he can manifest an entire world system within the space of a single atom, it says, without that atom expanding or the world system contracting. So we may feel like, oh, if you manifest the whole world system, like we have the sense of size and so forth. We have a sense that these laws of nature, they exist in and of themselves. Scientists have found them to exist, and they can only be that way, and they could not be any other way. But we forget that our existence as a human being, living in a certain world, living with certain laws of nature, natural laws, well, many of those are dependent on the karmic causes and conditions, the karmic causes we accumulated in the past. So we're born in a certain world where you have these laws of nature, but they may be very different in other universes. Now, of course, there are universal laws of nature, such as the law of karma, which, even the Buddha, certain actions lead to certain experiences. That is also true for the Buddha. Contaminated karma, the law of contaminated karma and its contaminated experiences, that is true for sentient beings. That is a universal law. But different laws of nature, other laws of nature apply to us versus a Buddha. And so Buddha can manifest a world system within a single atom, it is said. And it's mind-boggling. It's kind of like, can't even imagine that. But it's still helpful to understand the possibilities. And also in terms of time, can do so within a single instant until the end of time. So there's no limitation in that way in terms of space and time. So that's what verses 26 and 27 tell us. And then very important are the qualities of a Buddha, such as the powers. So that's what we're interested in, because a Buddha has great love and compassion and wisdom, but those need to be communicated. Those need to be, there need to be certain powers that come along with them that directly help us, that are benefiting us in such a way that the Buddha's teachings, the Buddha's inspiration, the Buddha's example can actually take us to enlightenment. And they are presented in a brief way first, verses 28 to 30. Just a list of those. And then starting with verse 31, they're explained extensively. So I'll go through 31, 32, 33, 34 once again, just briefly. Maybe we can display the text, and this is how far we got, basically. So it's starting with verse 31. What does it teaches us? It teaches us the first of these powers that are so important. Actually, the 5 powers we can think of the 5 powers in a way that the first 5 are like the basis, and the next 5 are specifically in terms of practice. So in relation to what a Buddha knows and how a Buddha can guide us, especially from the point of view of guiding us on the path. So in verse 31, what the Buddha, the power that is here described, the power that is described here is the power that knows what is correct and what is incorrect. So in particular, with regard to causes and certain effects, such an important, I said law of nature. The law of cause and effect actually includes the law of karma. So that it's important that the law of karma and the law of cause and effect are not the same, because the law of karma here the kind of cause, it's a particular cause. It's an volitional action, which has an effect that is, well, basically certain experiences, to kind of say it in a rough kind of way. So that's the law of karma. It's a type of law of cause and effect. But the law of cause and effect, that's like this generality, and just one aspect of that generality is the law of karma. Well, that is important to understand, and a Buddha has complete understanding of that. And how's that so important? Of course, we wish for certain results, certain effects, and in order to attain those, certain causes need to be achieved. And we get it wrong many times. So a Buddha doesn't. From such and such a cause, certain effects will arise. That understanding a Buddha has. And that this is certainly correct has been declared by those who know such truth. Who are they? The enlightened Buddhas. They have understood this, and they completely understand which causes give rise to which effects. And what is contrary to this statement, that is incorrect. So how often do we feel, oh, I just engaged in that non-virtue. Yeah, it's a non-virtue, but it brings me happiness. No, that's a misunderstanding. Or feeling that I've done a lot of positive things and the results are only negative, so my positive actions lead to suffering. No, again, there are different causes that lead to this suffering. The virtuous actions can only, as a karmic cause, can only lead to a karmic result of the experience of happiness. So to understand that. And all sorts of other misunderstandings that arise in terms of cause and effect. And there's so many of them. Many of our misunderstandings, our misapprehensions with regard to reality relate to this law of cause and effect. So the Buddha knows exactly law of cause and effect. Such unobstructed knowledge of limitless fact is described as a power. Okay. So in other words, knows exactly the law of cause and effect. What causes lead to what effect. And of course can guide us in that way most effectively. Okay, that's the first power. Then the next power in verse 132 is the power of knowing the ripening of karma. Okay, so not just the law of cause and effect in general, although I did mention examples of karma, but also the fact, that's what Lama Tsongkhapa mentions as part of verse 131, that once you realize emptiness directly, you cannot be reborn you can only be reborn 7 more times within samsara. I'm talking about Arya path, my path of seeing, also on the Hira ground, for instance. So if you're a Hira, you can only be reborn after you realize emptiness directly 7 more times, not more than that. So such facts that certain cause, direct realization of emptiness, leads to not more than 7 rebirths in samsara, if at all, any rebirth. But anyway, if at all means under the control of karma and afflictions. All right, anyway, so that's 31, saying the Buddhas know cause and effect. 32 tells us about karma. So in particular, the law of karma. There's different diverse fruitional effects. What is the effect of certain karmas? That of the desired actions, desired virtuous causes that lead to desired effects, and the undesired, so are non-virtuous causes, non-virtuous karma. So that are not mixed, that are just virtues or just non-virtuous. Desired and undesired means like just virtues or just non-virtuous. Their opposite are mixed, that are not purely virtuous or purely non-virtuous, but they're mixed actions, a little bit virtue, a little bit non-virtue, depending on the motivation, depending on the enactment on the execution of a certain action, and so forth. And their exhausting factor, all the other aspects, all the factors that bring about the exhaustion of certain negative karma, and so forth. The knowledge that penetrates these with unimpeded potency and force, so without any limitation, a knowledge that pervades all 3 types is described as a power. So how helpful to know the karma of all sentient beings and what their results are. Okay, then the third power is the power, The third power is the power that knows the diverse aspirations of beings. So all the different yearnings, the yearnings that emerge from factors such as attachment. So there are different causes for our wishes. Most of them, many of them are the result, of course, of attachment. But there's many virtuous ones. There are extreme diversity. There are the inferior ones, the intermediate ones, the extraordinary ones. Knowing even the aspiration veiled by other factors. Okay, so basically, first of all, those coming from attachment, from afflictions, and then not the only ones, also those, because it says such as attachment, but also the yearnings that come from faith and virtuous kind of yearnings. There are so many different wishes and aspirations, inferior ones wanting to kill someone, intermediate ones, well, maybe just wanting to, I don't know, eat and sleep and so forth. And some that are, intermediate as in like not really non-virtuous, but also not virtuous either, just the wish to, have a cup of tea. And then some that are extraordinary, of course, the wish to become fully enlightened. So knowing even the aspirations that are obscured that obscure the seeds of such aspirations. So knowing other factors that are veiled by other factors, so that are not directly obvious, well, knowing those as well. Such pervasive knowledge that engages all three types, so the aspirations of all sentient beings and the three types, that is the power that knows aspirations of sentient beings. So again, however overwhelming that may seem, just think of those first three. If you become enlightened, you have knowledge of cause and effect, you have knowledge of the ripening of karma, each and every sentient beings, what are the exact causes of this particular experience, and what is this particular action, what experiences does it lead to, what results does it have, what does this person yearn for? We have so many wishes in a single day, and some of them are inferior, some are intermediate or neutral, and so forth. Anyway, point being, knowing that, how effective can we be just based on that knowledge? And there's a lot more going through the other powers, but how effective can we be with other sentient beings? And then number 4. What's number 4? The power to know the diverse elements. Here, elements doesn't mean the primary elements, not the foundational quality, fundamental elements such as earth, water, fire, and wind, but rather the different aspects such as the eye sense faculty. So the Buddha skilled in differentiating the elements have stated that the nature of the eyes and so forth, the different sense faculties that sentient beings have. So eye sense faculty and so forth, that includes the eye sense faculty up to the mind, the 6 objects that sentient beings perceive, that they're able to perceive. And it's important to understand we have a sense that there's this objective world out there that everyone perceives in a certain way. But again, of course, what we perceive as human beings is limited to our karma, of our karmic, imprints of our karmic due to the karma we accumulated in the past. So there's certain things we can perceive right now. Therefore, the objects of our sense consciousness, of our consciousness, the Buddha has knowledge of those, have knowledge of our consciousness itself. So the nature of the eyes and so forth constitutes an element. Knowledge of the fully awakened Buddhas is infinite, so it includes those sense faculties, it includes the objects of our minds, includes the minds themselves. So that which penetrates all the diverse elements is held to be a power. That is the 4th power. This is how that's what we got to last time. And then, of course, there's the 5th power. What is the 5th power? Knowing superior and knowing which faculties are superior and which are not. So again, among sentient beings, just all sorts of sentient beings, some are superior, some are less so. Sharp acumen in thought and so on is called one with superior faculty. I know some people have a hard time with that, like differentiating. They say like differentiating between people having greater faculty and intermediate. That's kind of discriminatory. But actually, how is that? I mean, it's like we all have the potential for superior faculty. And within there's some changes. I mean, maybe in one life it's superior and then it degenerates again. It's only intermediate and then inferior and it becomes superior again. I mean, there's just constant change. Hopefully there's usually a tendency for our faculty to become more and more superior, to improve ever more, to become greater as we go along. But there may be some bumps on the road. There may be some maybe some degenerating of, may lose certain abilities, but it's also just in terms of spiritual faculty. Some people apply more reasoning, they're less controlled by their emotional, like especially negative emotions, and then there's some intermediate and some more inferior, and it's all relative anyway, so it's not like we're stuck with that forever, and it's not saying that we don't have Buddha nature and so forth, but we can still see differences. I mean, I could definitely see there's some great practitioners and I'm deeply inspired by them, and I know I'm totally inferior to most practitioners, but that's okay. It's better than not making an effort. So I don't have a problem with that. Being of an inferior faculty, it is what it is, but there's room for improvement. Anyway, I'm just addressing this because I've had people have a hard time when, especially in the Lamrim, talking about those of medium capacity and those. It seems to be so discriminatory, but that's just a temporary state. We've just reached different levels. And like we know, everyone has Buddha nature and everyone will at some point reach that highest level. Anyway, so, but the Buddhas, of course, they know exactly that, the different faculties, and they can, of course, act accordingly. Okay, so the mastery of all faculties, such as the eyes and their correlations, this knowing free of attachment impediment is described as a power. So really 35 is just telling us, well, in terms of what sentient beings can do, their faculty, their abilities, they know exactly that. So those first 5 are just in general in terms of sentient beings, how effective a Buddha can be. And then starting with 36, it's the knowledge, first the power to know all the path. So here it's in particular with regard to engaging in practice. So all the different paths, where they lead to, what are the result. And of course, based on the first 5, the Buddhas can advise sentient beings in the most effective way. Let me just check the time. Yeah, okay. So certain paths lead to Buddhahood, while others to Pratyeka Buddha and Sravaka enlightenment, yet others lead to the realms of hungry ghosts, animals, devas, that is celestial beings, humans, hell beings, and so forth. So this includes the path, of course, to liberation and enlightenment, but it also includes, of course, what we usually wouldn't call path, but, well, you can also describe them as mental states that lead to inferior states, of course. So again, a Buddha knows exactly those and can guide sentient beings accordingly. And then with regard to 37, 37 is the power to know the different kind of meditative absorptions, the liberating factors, we discussed them briefly before, the concentration, meditative attainments, and so forth. So in accord with the various yogis, so those who are practicing in the diverse worlds, not just in our world, like I said, there are endless worlds, there are meditative absorptions, liberating factors, certain types of concentrations, meditative attainments, all those, such as the 9 different levels. But Buddha has unimpeded knowledge of these. And this again is described as a power, because especially knowing the path to enlightenment, knowing these states of mind. I mean, if someone gets stuck in a certain concentration, in a certain, they have the guidance of a Buddha, of the Buddhas, of a Buddha, to help them to continue on or deepen their understanding and so forth. And then, of course, the next power, what is it, 38, in verse 38, It's the power to know past existences, know one's own past, of course. For a Buddha, of course, that knowledge there, but also extremely important, more importantly, those of others. So to know the past lives of self and others across deluded existences, knowing these life of each and every numberless being, knowing exactly where beings are coming from. I mean, knowing the past, it would be helpful for us. I mean, for me personally, because I'm making the same mistakes over and over again in every life. Incredible, making them over and over again. So just knowing, growing from just, well, knowing my own life, but of course, in terms of benefiting sentient beings, knowing exactly what they've done and so forth. That's also a power. Knowing the lives of each and every numberless being, their basis or where they were born, the places they were born, the parents they had, the self that they had, and so forth. Knowing all this is described as a power. That's 38. And 39, it's about the future, knowing how sentient beings, the death of sentient beings, and where they're going to be reborn. And again, to guide them accordingly, in the sense like, well, if you do this, you're going to be reborn there. If you don't do this, you're going to be reborn, right? So to know exactly how they can guide sentient beings in order for them to know where they're likely going to be reborn and so forth. So the birth and death of sentient beings, each and every one of them, so connecting therefore with new aggregates, and so their birth, inhabiting worlds, reaching to the edges of space, anywhere. It's not limited to this place or another place. Knowing exactly what karma they've accumulated in this life, so the knowledge that penetrates all these right at the time and in their varied details, which is completely pure and unimpeded. Again, that's the power of knowing death and rebirth. And then the last one, 40, that's 40, that's of the 10 powers, is the knowledge of the cessation of contaminants. So knowing cessation, the different types of cessation. And that's most important, because really reaching Buddhahood is about getting rid of what's extra, getting rid of what's not in the nature of our mind, what just shouldn't be there, and the presence of which causes all our trouble. And that needs to be eliminated. And knowing the cessation of those, of course, is so helpful, again, in guiding sentient being. So through the power of omniscience, the Buddha can know this seizing, the swift seizing, or the destruction, the elimination of the afflictions, desire, and so forth, as well as their imprints. And so he also knows the cessation of the afflictions of Shravakas, hearers, and other practitioners, all the cessations, Pratyeka Buddha, Bodhisattvas, and so forth, that are brought forth by their uncontaminated wisdom, by their cognition, that is, by their understanding. So it's through understanding, through an understanding of reality, through realizing emptiness, that different cessations, different elimination of obscurations are attained, and that knowledge a Buddha has. So if you think of these 10 power, what this knowledge, that's all we need, really. I mean, what else is there to know, to be the best guide of sentient beings? That's exactly what Buddhas need to lead sentient beings towards enlightenment, and to think back of not just the Buddha somewhere, but we can reach that state, we ourselves, to bring it closer to our own heart, in the sense that we can become just like that. We can become Buddhas who are so beneficial to sentient beings in that way described. How wonderful. And understanding these powers inspires even more to work towards becoming a Buddha, attaining that awakened state. And then in verses 41 and 42, that's the next aspect of the past of this text. In these two verses, Chandrakirti describes how all these qualities are actually inexpressible. So he's basically saying I'm talking about the qualities of a Buddha. I'm talking about something that is inexpressible. I mean, just hearing about it sounds like some kind of fairy tale. I mean, in one atom manifest the whole universe without the universe contracting or the atom expanding. It's like, what? It's like any sense of what's physically possible is contradicted by that. And of course, everything else, all this incredible knowledge, all this incredible understanding, these abilities. I mean, it's mind-boggling. Of course, our mind is not able to comprehend that. It's like telling a 5-year-old one about quantum physics. It's like a 5-year-old is totally overwhelmed. So we're like, our mind has not expanded, has not reached that level where we can really fully grasp these qualities. It's not saying that it cannot reach that state. Just as a 5-year-old one can one day become a professor, the mind is flexible, it's placid, due to neuroplasticity, the neuroplastic nature of our mind. I can't say it right now. Our mind, of course, so our brain is plasticity of our brain that allows, of course, also for our mind. It was actually our mind that enables our brain for it to change. Our mind can change in a way that it can become the mind of a Buddha, and therefore at some point we fully understand this. But what does Chandrakirti tell us? Well, he gives us this analogy. He talks about birds. Do not stop flying because there's no more sky. They do so when they have exhausted their strength. Okay, so when do birds stop flying? Well, the sky is finished. So now I'm no longer, I can no longer fly because there's no longer any sky left. No, the sky is limitless. They stop flying when they've exhausted their strength. Likewise, Shravakas and the like, as well as Bodhisattvas, when they talk about the Buddha's qualities, right? I mean, Chandrakirti himself, but also Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, these great practitioners or Bodhisattvas, well, they're pretty much, they talk about the qualities of a Buddha, but at some point they cannot express all of them. There's a limit to them, because although the qualities of a Buddha are limitless, like the sky, but they're just not able. They're like an exhausted bird, basically. They're not able, not that they're exhausted to talk about it, but they're limited by their understanding, their capacity to actually express them. So this is what he says in verse 41, in other words. So just as a bird, now looking at Lama Tsongkhapa's explanation, so just as birds, when they cruise the sky, they do not stop flying because there's no more sky, because the sky has no limit. So they haven't reached the end of the sky, but rather they do so, they stop, because as a result of their flying on and on, they're exhausted. They have exhausted their strength. Similarly, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, as well as Bodhisattvas, on the different grounds, they will cease declaring the Buddha's qualities that are actually infinite as space. But not because the qualities have been exhausted, but rather they cease because their power of the mind has been defeated. They're the power of the mind, the power of their mind has been, it's too limited that they can continue on. So given that the qualities of a Buddha cannot be expressed in their entirety, the question arises, how could someone like me, the author of this commentary, so it goes on to say in 42, therefore, if that being the case, how could someone like me, Chandrakirti, the author of this text, entering the middle way, know and speak of all the Buddha's qualities? Nonetheless, although, so 42, that's verse 42, nonetheless, since the noble Nagarjuna has described them, relying on his explanations, and setting hesitations or doubts aside, I've spoken briefly about them. So in other words, in verse 31 and 42, Chandrakirti says, well, it's really difficult to talk about the qualities of a Buddha, but Nagarjuna has set a great example doing so, and I cannot express them fully. We're limited like those birds are, although the qualities are limitless. Well, still, I've talked about them here. All right, let me check the time. Okay. 9 minutes after 7. We still got a little bit time left. So I'm going through it quite quickly because really there's nothing difficult to understand. It's not hard to understand, but it still needs to be heard. It needs to be understood. And of course, digested by way of reflecting on it, and eventually, of course, also meditating on it, so that we can deepen our wish to also become enlightened. So understand, however mind-boggling these qualities seem and however overwhelmed we are by them, it's totally natural that we are overwhelmed because you don't have the mind of a Buddha. And talking about them, it's still very limited what we hear about them, but it still helps us to get a sense of those. And then the next verse, verse 43, it briefly talks about the benefits of knowing the twin qualities, the two qualities. So we talked about the 10 powers very extensively, but there are two qualities that are most important, basically, or by which the Buddha can be summarized, the Buddha's qualities. It is the understanding, it's the profound, it's the profound quality and the vast quality. So what does this mean? The profound is the knowledge of wisdom, and the vast, of course, includes bodhicitta. It includes all the other qualities that a Buddha has other than the realization of emptiness. So when we say the Dharmakaya, or the mind realizing emptiness, the Dharmakaya from the point of view of realizing emptiness, that is the profound. And then all the other qualities, such as the 10 powers that we went through before, all the knowledge that is different from the knowledge of emptiness, the powers, the different grounds that have been described, well, they're described as vast. So by understanding the nature of these qualities, the profound and the vast, so understanding these essential factors and by cultivating them in meditative practice, these twin qualities of the Buddha, these two qualities of the Buddha are obtained. And now this is really saying, it sounds so complicated, but it's really like you can summarize all the qualities. What do we need to practice? Those two. And His Holiness so beautifully talks about those two by way of saying, well, practice emptiness, practice bodhicitta. And of course, bodhicitta goes hand in hand with practicing generosity, ethical discipline, patience, and so forth. It's kind of like it's part of the practice of bodhicitta. So really the vast is the practice of bodhicitta. And however complicated it all seems, it is complicated, our mind is complicated. So therefore the path is complicated. What do you expect? What do we expect? But it's actually can be also put forth in a simple way. So in a simple way, so that we're not that confused about it. Oh my God, all that. Where am I going to start? As His Holiness keeps saying time and again, those two. That's what we should focus on. And the rest will slowly come. If we don't give up on that, if we continue on that. And the good thing is that if we really practice this sincerely, and there'll be ups and downs, and we can practice one day better and the next day won't, and so forth. Just let's expect that, right? We have a mind right now that is not accustomed to those states. But if we practice that, even forget about Buddhahood, leave aside Buddhahood. Of course, that's the goal. But even here and right now, our lives will become happier, more peaceful. And of course, as Holiness keeps saying, inner peace, really, world peace, start with inner peace, okay? To actually work towards world peace. Yeah, it's great to go to a demonstration and all that and do that. Yes, that's all important. No one is denying the importance of that, and do whatever you need to do for world peace. But also at the same time, start developing inner peace. And how do you do that? By practicing those two. Okay. All right. So anyway, what does 43 tell us? I'm checking the time again. All right. So what does it tell us? It tells us those are the two main qualities that a Buddha has. All right. And then the next, what is it? 44. It describes the emanation body, but in a slightly different way as before. It was mentioned before. Now I'm wondering, should I go through it? I mean, I did a lot today, 43 verses. That's the most I've probably ever covered in a class. But I don't feel like I have to explain that much because you know all this. We've gone through all this in a certain way. And of course, you're welcome to ask questions, which leads me to saying one thing. I forgot to say that. Anyway, so let's leave it until we got to 43. We'll have time for some meditation. But I also want to mention something that I forgot to say. You probably have questions. I received some questions. I didn't forget that I got them, but I thought it's best to keep them to the end. Now, those of you who sent me questions, because I'm a mess when it comes to email. I'm terrible. I don't know how many emails I don't check because I got so much else to do. WhatsApp, I kind of barely manage, but email is a different matter. So I try my best. But if you could really send those emails to me again, I mean, send them to Dalit. That's probably the easiest. And then she can forward them to me. Oh, just a sec. Okay, sorry. That was a little irritating. So if you can send your questions to Dalit, again, if I haven't answered them yet, please do so. Send them to her. If you've got my email address, you can, of course, send them to me as well, but I'm more likely to overlook them, like not notice them. So with Dalit, I usually enter her in my email and then I find all her emails. So please write them, send them again, and I'll make time towards the end of it. Okay, so maybe we'll finish next time. If not next time, then the time after that. But I also want to answer all your questions. Okay, great. Yeah, so that was a summary and a brief kind of explanation of these powers. Now let's meditate, especially on these powers. Let's really internalize what we've learned. And again, as usual, we start with some breathing meditation to let go of any disruptive thoughts. So now let's take a moment to remind ourselves that we all have the potential to become fully enlightened. That is just a matter of time. And effort. And of course, the strength of our aspiration. That is driven by great love and compassion for all sentient beings. And once we are enlightened, we have these amazing mental qualities, such as the 10 powers. Knowing exactly which causes give rise to which results. And what were the causes and conditions that led to a certain result? And that way we know what is correct and what isn't correct in terms of cause and effect. And that means also that we have the power to know the ripening of karma. We know the karma of each and every sentient being. We know the causes that gave rise to their present situation. The actions that caused their experiences. And we know what their present actions, which results they give rise to. We also have the power to know their diverse aspirations. What is it that each and every sentient being wants? What are their desire, yearning, but also positive aspirations, spiritual aspirations? What are their interests? And also their needs. We have the power to know the diverse elements, such as sense faculties, each and every sentient beings, the objects that they perceive, and the minds, different types of consciousness that can perceive these objects. We know what they're thinking. They're constantly worrying about what they're fearful of, and so forth. We have the power to know which faculties are superior and which are not. So what are sentient beings especially good at? And what is it they're not that good at? Are they advanced in their practice? Are they beginners? Or not at all interested in anything spiritual? Think that with these 5 powers, how effectively can we guide sentient beings to lead them towards the path? Through what we teach them, but also through what we emanate. What we display in order to inspire sentient beings. And then for those who are on the path, well, we have the power to know all the path. Where all the different mental states, what they lead to. Which aspirations lead to which state of their liberation or enlightenment. More specifically, we have the power to know meditative absorptions, liberating factors, concentrations, meditative attainments, and so on. We have the power to know past existences, all the past lives of sentient beings. We have the power to know their death and their rebirth of all sentient beings. So we know where sentient beings come from and where they go to. Over so many endless lifetimes. And we also have the last power, the power to know the cessation of all that is contaminated, all that is an obstruction. We know exactly where someone is on the path in terms of what they have eliminated and what they still need to overcome. And so let's think how wonderful it would be if we had all these powers. So that driven by great love and compassion for sentient beings, we can perfectly guide them towards the state of full awakening. So let's once again deepen our aspiration. based on our sincere affection and compassion for all sentient beings. By thinking, may I become fully enlightened, attain those 10 powers and all the other qualities of a Buddha. To actualize my fullest potential. And be of greatest benefit to myself and all other sentient beings. And so let's complete our session today, dedicating all the virtue, all the positive potential we accumulated together. Dedicate it towards attaining those 10 powers and all the other enlightened qualities of a Buddha for the benefit of each and every sentient being. Let's also dedicate the virtue we accumulated towards the long life, the long and healthy life, our kind and compassionate spiritual masters like His Holiness the Dalai Lama. May they have an extremely long life and continue to teach. And may all our virtues help sentient beings right here and right now to overcome their problems, their worries, their difficulties. May Geshe make a complete recovery, as well as Tali Lubin. May she too make a complete recovery. And also in the way described by Shantideva, let's dedicate according to his prayer. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. for as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain. Until then, may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. All right, thank you. Okay, so I'll see you again next week. I hope there won't be any further disruption. I don't think there will be. And please remember, of course, bodhicitta, emptiness, those two I talked about at the beginning of this session. So make an extra effort this coming week, the way His Holiness talks about love, compassion, and so forth. All right, and then I'll see you again next week. Be well.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care.
Bye, everyone, and thank you.
Be safe.